What's up guys? In this video we're going to be doing a tour of the basement gym. I'm going to be giving you an update on where everything is at with that. And in order to make sure that you get value out of this video and make sure that it is useful for you and your home gym, we're going to be dividing all of the equipment that's in here into one of 7 categories. The first category is going to be your must-have pieces of equipment. So if you buy nothing else, this is the stuff that you should consider mandatory if you're going to have a home gym in order to get the best results possible. So we're talking about the things that are going to be the most versatile, the things that you can use for the most amount of exercise, the most bang for your buck pieces of equipment here. The second category are going to be the things that are still very useful, still very valuable, but maybe are a little bit more niche, a little bit more goal specific, and then depending on what your specific goals are, it could potentially bump this category up into that must-have category, or it could potentially bump it down into the things that I wouldn't recommend you to buy. Which brings me to the third category, which are the things that I wouldn't recommend you to buy unless you have the floor space and the extra money available. The name of the game when it comes to garage gyms, basement gyms, is floor space and budget. So these pieces aren't necessarily bad pieces, it's just that they are either very, very specific, or they take up a lot of space, or are expensive, and therefore aren't necessarily great purchases for most people, but could potentially be good purchases depending on, again, floor space and budget. The fourth category is going to be your DIY equipment, and some of these DIY pieces are going to fall into that first category of must-have, so make sure to stick around for the DIY section of this video. And most of the things in the DIY section are actually very cheap for the amount of benefit that you get out of it, so that is going to be one of the biggest pieces of this video to pay attention to. The fifth category is going to be accessories and attachments, and when I say accessories, I don't mean things like knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, wrist wraps, all that kind of stuff. I specifically mean accessories and attachments that will allow you to do more exercises, things that will add versatility to your home gym. 6, I will very briefly touch on the flooring that we have in here, and then the last category is going to be the future plans, so the things that we will be doing in here and things that you might want to consider doing in your home gym as well. But before we get into the video, hi, my name is Ryan Treadaway, founder of TreadawayTraining.com, where we turn skinny guys into jacked men. If you want more information on body transforming training and nutrition topics, as well as the occasional home gym topic as well, consider subscribing. Of course, we're gonna start out with the very most important pieces of equipment, and depending on your goals, and your space constraints, there are one of 2 paths that you'll want to go down. So the first option would be getting a barbell, weight plates, and a rack and bench, and that combination will serve you very well far into the future, and for most people would be good enough for most people's goals. And then if you don't have powerlifting specific goals, or if you have a much more limited space, then going a dumbbell route, particularly adjustable dumbbell route, would be the better option for you. And then of course having a weight bench so that you can do the exercises that require lying down. If you're gonna go down the barbell, rack, bench, weight plate route, I would advise you to put most of your budget, allocate the most of your budget towards a good barbell, simply because that's your connection to the weights. You want to have a good barbell, you want to have one that has a good knurling, something that you're going to be able to get a good grip on, all of that kind of stuff. And then the other pieces are a little bit less important in comparison. So the next place that I would recommend you to put a little bit more money into is kind of a toss-up between the rack and the bench, because the rack, you can actually get pretty good racks for not that much money. This rack in particular is a little bit more expensive. This is the Rogue RML3. I did a video specifically on that rack, but you can get something like the Rep Fitness PR 1100, I believe it is, for like $200 something, and it's a very good rack. So you can get a great rack without spending a ton of money. In terms of the bench, the main consideration would be whether you want to go with a flat bench or an adjustable bench. We actually have both here because I actually had bought a bench before my parents and I had combined our equipment, and they have a flat bench. The advice that I would give you there is, if you're going to allocate a lot of money towards a bench, go ahead and get an adjustable bench so that you have that extra variety of being able to do incline exercises, decline exercises, things like that. But if you're on a tighter budget, go with a flat bench, because if you get a cheap adjustable bench, it's going to be a little bit more rickety versus you can spend less money on a flat bench and still get a very, very, very good flat bench. Again, talk about that more specifically in another video, which I'll put up in the cards and down in the description. And then in terms of the weight plates, my advice there is actually to just get the cheapest plates that you can get that will do the job. If you need bumper plates specifically because you're into powerlifting or CrossFit or something like that, that's a different story. But if you don't have those specific goals, you don't plan on doing one of those two specific activities, just get the cheapest plates that you can find. We specifically got bumper plates simply because my parents found a really good deal on some used bumper plates, and that was at the height of the demand for gym equipment. Everything was sold out everywhere. They got a good deal on these bumper plates, so they went and got them. In terms of the steel plates, these were super cheap. We got these, one of the sets was during the pandemic, one of the sets was before the pandemic. That's why they're mismatched. But at the time, Academy had this cool deal going on where it was something like 200 something pounds. So it came with like a set of 45s, 35s, 25s, 10s, 5s, 2.5. So it came with one set of everything plus a bar, which was very cheap, nothing special, but would get the job done at the time. And it was pretty cheap. It was like 180 bucks or something. And so we have that bar, which is just kind of a beater bar that can be used for anything. We have this bar, which is another beater bar that we use for all of our landmine exercises. And then we have a ton of weight plates just because of that special. And if you're going to go down the dumbbell path, I would recommend getting adjustable dumbbells versus fixed dumbbells, simply because going down that path, for most sets of dumbbells, there can be very, very expensive sets of adjustable dumbbells. These Iron Master adjustable dumbbells right here are pretty expensive, but worth it in my opinion. But for the budget conscious person just wanting to get the most bang for your buck, you can get the good old traditional spin lock type dumbbells. That's going to be the best option for most people, simply because you're going to get that bang for the buck there, and you're going to have that expandability. So each time you need to go up in weight, if you had fixed dumbbells, you would have to just buy 30-pound dumbbells, then you'd have to buy a pair of 35-pound dumbbells, and each time you needed to go up in weight, it would get more and more and more expensive, and then also would take up more and more and more space. Whereas if you got the adjustable dumbbells, it's going to be a lot cheaper, because each time you need to go up a 5-pound increment, you can just buy 4 2.5-pound plates, and then 4 5-pound plates, and then you can just keep going up like that. You can save a lot of money in the long run going that route. Now, one note that I do want to make specifically on these Iron Master dumbbells, there seems to be a lot of controversy around these dumbbells. I made a video talking about how much I love these dumbbells, and a lot of people seem to almost get mad at me because I like a pair of dumbbells. One thing that I will say about them is the time that it takes to change these, it takes a little bit longer versus some of the other options out there. Specifically, the Power Blocks or the Bowflex dumbbells are really fast to change. These do take longer than those to change, but they're faster than a traditional like spin lock dumbbell, and they feel like actual fixed dumbbells. So if I were to blindfold you and hand you these dumbbells and tell you to put them down on your knees and kick them up to do a dumbbell bench press, and I were to hand you a set of fixed dumbbells, my guess is that many of you would not be able to tell the difference. These things legitimately feel like fixed dumbbells, which is the most important feature for me specifically. That's the most important thing that I'm looking for. But they have that drawback of taking a little bit longer to change. So if you want something that's a little bit faster, you could go with Power Blocks or Bowflex or something like that. But if you're not doing a lot of drop sets or a lot of supersets, I think the Iron Masters are probably the best dumbbells on the market. The way we have our setup specifically is we have fixed dumbbells that go from 5 pounds all the way up to 50 pounds in 5-pound increments. And then we have the Iron Master dumbbells. If you have the 120 pound expansion and you have the big plates on there, they start at 55 pounds, and then so after that you can just add the 2.5s on each side or the 5 pounds on each side. And so we have it to where it's fixed dumbbells up to 50, so that if you are doing some of those lighter exercises, doing drop sets and things like that, that's an option. And then once you go above 50 pounds, we have these really nice Iron Master adjustable dumbbells. Additionally, if you went down the barbell weight rack, weight plate route, and you wanted to add on dumbbells after the fact, but didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money building up your dumbbell set, a really good cheap option would be to get some of these Olympic weight plate handles. And then that way you can use all of the weight plates that you already have, put them on here, and then you'll have dumbbell options. Now, in terms of all the things that I just mentioned, in terms of like feeling like traditional dumbbells and things like that, these definitely don't. But for not that much money, I think you can get these for about $20-25 a handle. So 50 bucks or so, and then you have access to as much weight as you can fit on these handles. So you essentially have a complete dumbbell set for only 50 bucks. So in that, in that regard, this is a very good option. The last piece of equipment that I personally would put into the must-have category would be a step-up box, specifically an adjustable step-up box, because this is an extremely versatile piece of equipment. Not only can you use it for the traditional uses of doing things like step-ups, you can do your agility exercises, so you can do like lateral box jumps, you can jump up onto the box, all kinds of different cardio and agility exercises that you can do with this. You can do box squats, you can use it for different seated exercises, and you could even use it for something like a stand. So if you're doing landmine exercises, you could put the bar up onto this so that you could get up under the bar easily for things like Viking presses or things like that, versus having to start from the ground. And that's why this is a must-have piece of equipment. This is an extremely versatile piece of equipment and one that I would definitely recommend for your home gym. Another thing that I would consider to be mandatory, especially if you're working out in a very confined space and with very limited equipment availability to start with, resistance bands. And the reason why I would recommend these is simply because there are a lot of different exercises that you can do with these. You can hit a lot of different muscles at a lot of different angles with these, and they're super cheap. You can get a pretty decent set of resistance bands that comes with the handles, comes with the ankle attachment, comes with a door anchor, all the stuff that you'll need for typically around 25 bucks. Moving into that second category of things that could potentially be in category 1, but could also drop down to a category 3 depending on your goals and budget and all those type of things. The first item is a weight vest, specifically this Kensei brand weight vest that is loadable with Olympic weight plates. So this is an extremely versatile piece of equipment, and I really went back and forth on whether or not this should go in category 1 or if it should be in category 2, and the only reason why I did put it in category 2 is simply because it is pretty expensive. If I remember correctly, this is around 200 bucks, so it's pretty pricey, but it's also an extremely versatile piece of equipment. So basically any body weight exercise that you could possibly do, you now can overload that exercise by adding weight plates. It has these little weight stobs on the front and the back, and if I remember correctly, you can add up to 210 pounds, I believe, on this weight vest. So you're gonna be able to go a very long way on any traditional body weight type exercise, and this is a very, again, versatile piece of equipment that I would certainly recommend if your budget allows, because this thing, in addition to being so versatile, also takes up very little space, and I actually just hang it on another piece of equipment when I get done with this thing for the day, and so it basically takes up no additional floor space. Next up is going to be the Blaze Pod training system. This is a very, very, very interesting piece of equipment. So basically these pods light up different colors, and there's an app that goes along with it, and there are different games that you can play. There's different agility drills that you can do. There's things that can work on reaction time, can work on quick thinking, can work on just regular old agility and speed. So there is a very, very, very versatile piece of equipment, very good for anyone with more athletic type goals, or if you just want to have some fun doing some cardio. But this is also very expensive, and that's why it goes into the second category instead of the first category. Next up is going to be your treadmill. And treadmills are obviously a pretty versatile piece of equipment. You can do your low intensity steady state, you can do intervals on it, you can do a whole variety, incline, decline, depending on the treadmill that you have. So there's a whole lot of things that you can do with a treadmill, but ultimately it is a situation of this is very expensive, takes up space. If you don't have specific cardio goals, it's not going to be very important to you. So that's why it falls into that second category, because depending on what type of person you are, if you have that floor space available, and if you do have a lot of cardio goals and you want to be able to do cardio indoors, even when it's nasty outside and you can't do cardio outside, this could potentially be a very, very important piece for you. But it also could not be important at all, and something that you don't even want to purchase. So for that reason, mainly because of the floor space and the cost, it is in that second category versus the first category. Next, we're going to talk about category 3, which are the things that I wouldn't recommend unless your floor space and budget specifically allow for it. Now, these pieces aren't necessarily bad pieces. In fact, a few of them are great pieces of equipment, but they're just a little bit too specific, or take up too much floor space, or take up too much budget, to the point where it's hard for me to recommend these pieces for most people. So some of these might be useful to you and things that you want, but some things, probably things that you want to avoid. First on that list is going to be the full-on deadlift jack. And the reason why this is on the list is simply because it kind of just sits on the floor, takes up space. It does what it does. It's really good for what it does. It's really handy to have a deadlift jack if you are a powerlifter and are lifting a ton of weights, but it takes up a lot of floor space. So there are different options that you can go with if you are in a tighter space or on a more limited budget. Things like the dead wedge, or just a good old 2.5 pound plate that you can put under that first 45 that you put on there, and it's going to do the job mostly just as good for less money and for a lot less floor space. Next on the list is a TV, because you don't really need a TV when you work out, but this one specifically was already in the basement, so why not hook it up and use it? But this one in particular does take up a pretty good bit of floor space. Luckily, it was already taking up floor space near the area where we worked out, so we just went ahead and hooked it up. But again, not something that you need unless you have the budget available. Next on the list, curl bars, something that's not necessarily mandatory, but could be very useful because they're typically not very expensive. And if you are the type of person who gets a lot of wrist and elbow pain from doing tricep extensions and curls, you can use that to alleviate some of that stress on the elbow joints. And then somehow over the course of time, we ended up with 3 curl bars. So we have a regular curl bar there, another regular curl bar over there against the wall, and then a nicer, fancier, rackable curl bar. So we've kind of accumulated a few different bars that we don't necessarily need over time, but again, something that could be useful, but probably not something that you're going to want to spend money on, especially in the early stages of building a home gym. Next up, all-in-one home gym. These things typically take up a lot of space, are very expensive, are limited on the amount of weight that you can go up. Once you max out, there's no expandability to it. Many times, I would say more often than not, are not super well built. So there's just a bunch of reasons why this isn't the best option. Now that said, if you're in a very, very tight space and want some variety with all of different attachments, different exercises that you can do, if you find one for a very, 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 very good price, you know, that could potentially be an option for you, but not something that I would typically recommend due to the expensiveness, the lack of build quality in most cases, and the inability to expand upon it. Next on the list is this good old glute ham developer, GHD for short. These are very good pieces of equipment, but again, they are also very expensive and take up a lot of floor space. So for that reason, it's hard to recommend these, again, unless you have the floor space and budget available. This GHD was actually given to me by a good friend of mine from back when I lived in Huntsville, Alabama. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to him. Jim, you're awesome. If you're watching this video, I appreciate it. Last item on this part of the list is inversion boots. These are boots where you can hang upside down from a pull-up bar. It's mainly used for decompression of the spine. You can do things like inverted sit-ups and things like that. But again, they're typically pretty expensive and pretty specific. So for those reasons, it goes on that third list. First item on the DIY list is actually something that I would also put in that mandatory list, and that's gonna be a cable setup. Cables are extremely versatile. You can train every single muscle that you have with a cable setup, and there are some unique ways that you can train certain muscles with cables specifically that you can't train them with any other piece of equipment. And I actually made a video talking about 4 different ways that you can set up a DIY cable setup, and this took about 25, 30 bucks, somewhere around there, maybe 40 bucks. I can't remember 100% for sure, but it was very cheap and will triple or quadruple the variety that you have available to you. And with this one in particular, it has a low pulley and a high pulley, so it's even more variety for only 30 bucks or so. Next up on the DIY list is a DIY landmine setup. I briefly mentioned the landmine already, and you don't have to buy any type of fancy landmine attachment. All you need is the corner of a room and something to keep the bar from damaging the wall. So what we did was we got a thick cardboard box, unfolded it, cut it, and just made it fit the corner of the room. And then we got an old piece of scrap carpet just for some additional protection, and then that's gonna work perfectly as a landmine. And that's gonna add a lot of versatility for essentially no money, because this is just scrap stuff that we had laying around anyway. And if you already have a barbell, you have a landmine, so that's a lot of extra versatility for no money at all. Next on the DIY list is this DIY weight tree. And this is a little bit more specific of a DIY because you're gonna need to know how to weld if you're gonna do something like this. Spoiler alert, I have no clue how to weld. I was an electrical engineer, now I train people. This is not in my skill set. My dad actually welded this. This is an old skateboard ramp and then a few metal stobs that were welded onto here to make a weight tree. So if you do know how to weld and you have some scrap metal laying around, free weight tree. Similar to the previous DIY, we have a weight rack for our bumper plates. This was actually a fish tank stand that we flipped upside down so that we could put the weight plates in there. But on this side over here, we actually have something even simpler, which would be something that you could do for free if you have any scrap wood laying around. That's literally just a piece of trim, and that just keeps the plates from rolling away from the wall. So you just stack up all the plates standing up and put that there as a stopper, and then you have your weight rack for your bumper plates. Another very handy, very cheap thing to have is just a bunch of scrap wood blocks. So have a bunch of 1x6s, 2x6s, 4x4s, just a bunch of scrap wood laying around that you can use for different things like platforms to put your feet up on, for calf raises and things like that. The next DIY is literally just a dense foam noodle that was cut in half and then split long ways so that it could go on this lat pull down bar as a pad. And what we do with that is we actually do calf raises with a cable, with the low cable. We use that as a pad so that we can put the lat pull down bar on our knees and then do seated calves that way. The next DIY is actually a way that you can do lat pull downs on the DIY high pulley setup. So just for about 50 to 60 bucks, you have a lat pull down. All you need is a weight pin, the cable setup that we already talked about, and then a towing strap. And so what you do is you put this under a chair. It can be just any regular chair, or you can do a step-up box, put it under there, put the strap under that, and then load a bunch of weight plates on top of it just for that weight so it'll hold you down. And then you reach this around, strap it down on your waist. It's gonna hold you down and you're gonna be able to do your lat pull downs. I've been using this for months at this point and it works fabulously. The next DIY would just be to buy one of these cheap pads that you would like kneel down on for gardening or something like that. And the way that I use these is for a pad for exercises like donkey calf raises. So I do donkey calf raises with the landmine, and then I just put this pad on my back so that the bar isn't digging into my back. And landmine donkey calf raises actually work extremely well. They will destroy your calves. So you can get one of these for like $1 from the dollar store, and then if you have your barbell for the landmine, you have everything you need in order to do that exercise. The last DIY is actually just this big fluffy beach towel. I use this for a few different things. For certain exercises, I've used it for a pad just to kind of keep the bar from being on my back. I've tried it with the landmine donkey calf raises and a few other things, but most often this actually gets used as just a little pad to go on top of that seat. One, because that one has kind of a sandpaper finish to the top, so in order for it not to mess your pants up or your shorts up when you're sitting on it, you need something in between it. Or when I'm using it as a platform like I mentioned earlier, so when I'm doing landmine presses or landmine donkey calf raises and I need a platform to get that bar up off the ground and there's a ton of weight on top of that platform, it keeps the metal plates from scratching up that sandpaper finish. Getting into the accessories, we're getting into things that are a little bit less important, a little bit more situational, but still valuable. So we're gonna go at a little bit more of a rapid fire pace with these. So first, we have blood flow restriction bands. I have a video explaining how blood flow restriction training works, but essentially these will allow you to use less weight while still getting a similar muscle growth benefit as if you were using heavier weights. So you can watch that video if you're interested in that. Ankle cuffs, these are great for things like glute kickbacks, hip abductions, things like that. And you can combine these with either resistance bands or the cable setup that we talked about, or you can even combine these with this chain to do things like lying hamstring curls with the cable, which is a very unique exercise that I love. And then we have something that I would probably recommend more for most people versus a full-on deadlift jack, which is a single side deadlift jack. This would be something that would be way more space saving, but would be almost as good as having a full-on deadlift jack. And then you have something like the dead wedge, which is gonna serve a similar purpose to this single side deadlift jack, but is only 15 bucks, and you could literally stick this in your pocket, stick it in a drawer. It's gonna take up essentially no space at all in your home gym. I have a video on both of these. And then this monstrosity here on the end is a head harness so you can do your neck exercises. If you're in contact sports, having a strong neck will go a long way for helping prevent neck and head injuries. Or if you just want to be the biggest, beefiest monstrosity possible, a very great way to increase the appearance of muscularity and just general size is to have a big, thick neck. So if you look at a picture of me, for example, before I started training my neck, and then after I started training my neck about 6 months down the road, I'll throw that comparison picture up on the screen. You can see just how much of a difference it makes to have a big neck, because after all, your neck is one thing that is always showing, even during the winter when you have on your thick winter clothing. And then over here we have even more accessories. You have your rope attachment, you have your single attachment, you have your V-bar attachment. This guy is actually very cool. This is a landmine attachment so that you can do rows. You simply slide this guy onto the bar, put a clip on here, you can put a chain if you want to increase the length, and then you can put any of your cable attachments on here so that you can do a variety of rowing exercises and things like that with your landmine bar. And we have our traditional lat pull down bar. We have the Viking press handle, which is something that I've been thoroughly enjoying here lately. And then my favorite cable attachment, which is this multi-neutral grip Rogue lat pull down bar. So you have multiple different widths of a neutral grip. That's great for a variety of pulling exercises, and you can even flip this thing upside down and put it on top of your squat rack and use it as a neutral grip pull-up bar. And one thing that I did want to briefly mention towards the end of this video is this flooring. It's a small touch. It's something that can be pretty expensive depending on the size of the space that you have available, and doesn't make a huge difference. But after we actually got the flooring and put it down, it ended up being, in my opinion, one of the most dramatic differences out of anything that we put in the basement, and just simply in terms of mindset. Because previously, when it was just the basement floor and then the equipment was here, it was just equipment in the basement, and essentially that's what it is. I mean, it's just equipment that you have in your garage or in your basement. But once we put down that flooring and it felt like it was a more dedicated space, if that makes sense. It felt like, rather than just going in the basement to do a get by workout, it was actually going to the gym to work out. And you know, maybe it's just me, but it felt like a really big mindset shift to have that dedicated flooring, because it felt like it was dedicating that space to this purpose versus just having extra equipment crammed in an open space in the basement, if that makes sense. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on in this video are some planned future updates that should be happening in the somewhat near future. The first one being, we have 2 gun rack style barbell holders that will hold 6 barbells total. We're gonna put those up on the wall, and what that will allow us to do is get all of those barbells up out of the floor so that we can better utilize that space and be able to put more equipment in here eventually, versus just having barbells laying on the ground. The next one, we're gonna put some hangers on the wall. So what that will probably look like, we have some like coat rack style hangers, like wall mounted coat rack hangers, and we're gonna put those up so that we can put all of those attachments on the wall and get rid of that bookshelf, again, to free up some space. And then, sticking with the theme of putting things on the wall, the TV that you might have seen earlier in the video just sitting on the ground over there, that, not the big fat TV, but the actual nice TV, that is gonna be going up on the wall under the clock right there. And that way, again, you know, TVs aren't mandatory, but that one is already here, so might as well make use of it. And then we'll take that treadmill and turn it to face the TV. And that way, if you are doing low intensity steady state cardio for, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you can watch the TV while you're doing the cardio. 2 other things that we're gonna do in terms of electrical, and this is gonna be something that Dad's gonna be doing, not me. We're gonna be adding outlets so that we can plug in things like the TV. You probably saw the extension cords and things that are over there in the corner. So rather than having extension cords running from here all the way to the far end of the basement to plug in close to the breaker box, we'll have some outlets over here. That way we can plug stuff in over here, make it a little bit nicer and neater. And we're gonna add in some more lights. We actually have the lights up already. They just need to be wired into the breaker box. We're also gonna get a Treadaway Training banner and put it on the wall, probably behind the squat rack. At some point, we're gonna build up a little bit nicer of a frame to put the bumper plates in, at least on that side, because those do fall over. So those smaller bumper plates, there are 10s and 15s. If the bigger plates aren't there next to them, those will just fall over. So we're gonna get something a little bit nicer to put those in. That'll probably happen a little bit later because that's working decently for now. And then we're just gonna do some more general cleaning and organization, maybe move some things around to see how we can best make use of the space that we have. And then the last thing, which will probably take a while, if we can find one at a decent price, we're going to add a leg press in here. And remember, all the different videos for all the different specific pieces of equipment are down in the description if you want to learn more about any of those. And then if you want to work with me, click this link. As always, God bless you and your family, and we'll see you next week. And that's all for this video. If you want to, yep, I'm in trouble. That was my wife. I'm in trouble. I said 30 minutes, and it's been like an hour.